你好，来办张。
那后来呢？我去了那么多地方，我发现啊，中国美食那么丰富。
I've traveled to many places across China and discovered just how diverse Chinese cuisine is, largely shaped by its geography and climate. Along the way, I learned an important principle. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Wherever you go, start by trying the local flavors.
Having spent more than 15 years in China, Pietro De Laurentis firmly believes that immersing oneself in local culture is essential, not only for scholars, but for anyone hoping to truly understand a place. Originally from Italy, his journey began as a curious student who stumbled upon Chinese calligraphy and fell in love. That spark turned into a lifelong passion. For more than 2 decades, Pietro has dedicated himself to the study of Chinese calligraphy, epigraphy, classical poetry, and semiotics, working to bring the beauty of Chinese aesthetics to a global stage. Now at 47, he teaches Chinese calligraphy history at the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts in southern China, and locals know him as Bi Luo.
我的中文名碧螺不是我自己给自己起的。
My Chinese name was given to me by a young Chinese man who worked at a restaurant while I was studying in Italy in 1997. At first, I thought it was just a phonetic translation of Pietro, but later I realized it had much deeper meaning.
含义特别深。
The name Bi Luo comes from a phrase by ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi, 万物毕露. It speaks to the idea that all things in the universe are interconnected, held together in an ever-changing whole. And Pietro has kept that name ever since.
而且呢，我在中国发表论文。
I've published papers and books in China under this name, and now that I have permanent residency here, I can even sign official documents with those 2 characters.
Pietro's journey into the heart of Chinese culture began almost 3 decades ago. Growing up in southern Italy, he knew little about Chinese culture, but after finishing high school, he made a bold decision to study something completely outside the realm of European civilization. And a relative suggested Chinese, predicting that China's global influence would grow. In 1996, Pietro enrolled at the University of Naples L'Orientale, one of the oldest institutions for sinology in Europe. He still remembers the textbook they used, Modern Chinese. For Pietro, the Chinese characters on the pages were like tiny, mysterious drawings. In the eyes of that 19-year-old, there was beauty woven between the lines.
我那时候呢，语文
Soon after, one of his professors, a teacher from China, introduced him to something even more captivating, the art of calligraphy.
我们就这个年轻的大学生嘛，对毛笔字、对书法都很好奇。
We were just young university students, really curious about brush writing and calligraphy. So we asked our teacher to give us a demonstration. He happened to have everything: the brush, xuan paper, and ink. We went to his dorm room, and he showed us how it's done. That was probably my first encounter with Chinese brush calligraphy, around the spring of 1997.
Xuan paper, also called rice paper, is a traditional Chinese material known for its softness and fine texture. It's been used for both calligraphy and painting for centuries. Watching those flowing strokes appear on paper with brush and ink was a moment of wonder for Pietro. But interest and curiosity didn't make it any easier to learn. The brush felt unfamiliar in his hand. The movements were strange, and unlike writing with a pen, brush calligraphy required a completely different posture, rhythm, and mindset.
除了这个拿毛笔的困难以外呢，还有一个掌握字体这个形体结构的诀窍的问题。
Beyond the struggle of holding the brush, there was also the challenge of understanding how Chinese characters are constructed, the relationships between different components. At first, I felt I'd never get it. But later, I realized that these techniques sink in over time with steady practice. From the very beginning, I understood calligraphy is an art that requires long-term commitment, patience, and perseverance.
This curiosity kept pushing him forward and eventually led him to China for the first time. In 1998, he spent half a year at the Beijing Film Academy. The city instantly captivated him as he found Chinese characters no longer lived just on textbooks. They were everywhere. He loved tracing the city on foot, exploring its hidden corners. One day, at his teacher's suggestion, he headed to Liulichang Culture Street, a historic part of Beijing known for antiques, paintings, and calligraphy. As he wandered through the bookstores and alleyway shops, he came across a small studio run by an elderly calligrapher.
然后呢，我请他给我写一个德字，道德的德。
And I asked him to write the character De for me, meaning virtue, but my Chinese wasn't good. I tried to say I wanted it in regular script, Kai Shu, but he misunderstood and wrote in a different style. After some back and forth, he finally understood. I was so thrilled. I still have that piece in Italy today. It was amazing to see someone truly skilled with a brush, to witness the flow of the strokes and the mastery in motion.
Kai Shu, or regular script, is the most widely used and standardized form of Chinese calligraphy. It's also the style that Pietro loves most. Years later, as he gained more experience, Pietro admits that his calligraphy work wasn't technically perfect. But to that young student, standing in a quiet Beijing alley, witnessing ink dance across paper, it was unforgettable.
我记得还有一次特别有意思，是我
Among many of his keepsakes, another memorable one was a gift he received at Baiyun Temple, one of the oldest Taoist temples in Beijing. It was his birthday that day, and Pietro decided to spend it walking through the temple's ancient courtyards. There, he struck up a conversation with a Taoist priest.
然后呢，跟他说今天是我生日，他就主动提我给你写一幅字。
I told him it was my birthday, and he kindly offered to write me a piece of calligraphy. He wrote a couplet: Virtue nurtures heaven and earth, the Tao follows nature. Then he signed it, respectfully presented to Mr. B. Luo. I was overjoyed. It was beautifully written, a meaningful gift. I asked a Chinese friend to help me frame it and hung it in my dorm. Later, I brought it back to Italy. It's still hanging in my study. I've cherished it ever since.
For Pietro, calligraphy is more than an art form. Each brushstroke is a connection to history, culture, and people. After returning to Italy, his journey with the brush didn't stop.
我认识了一位在中国专门教毛笔字的。
In late 1999, he met a Shanghai-born calligrapher named Wang Chengxiong, which marked the beginning of a lasting mentorship. Pietro has been learning from him ever since. Pietro says what sets him apart from many other sinologists is his persistent practice of calligraphy. In the years that followed, Pietro stayed closely connected with Chinese academia. He returned to China multiple times to deepen his understanding of both Chinese philology and calligraphy. The city of Hangzhou was one of the many cities that he explored. Located in eastern China, it is home to the China Academy of Art, one of the country's top art institutions where traditional calligraphy is studied, taught, and practiced. Pietro spent 1 year there studying Chinese calligraphy and later returned to pursue further studies at Zhejiang University. After earning his PhD in East Asian Studies from the University of Naples L'Orientale in 2007, he worked as a research fellow at the university for several years, teaching literary Chinese and modern Chinese. Over time, Pietro translated ancient Chinese poems into Italian and introduced Chinese calligraphy to wider audiences through publications and lectures, fostering cultural exchange between East and West. When asked about his favorite calligrapher, Pietro names Ouyang Xun, a Tang Dynasty master from over 1,000 years ago, widely recognized as a pioneer of the regular script. As he delved deeper into the study of calligraphy history, he soon realized that China's calligraphic tradition was far richer and more diverse than he had initially imagined.
随着我对书法史的这个研究
As I continued my study, I realized that great calligraphers in Chinese history were not limited to Ouyang Xun. There were many others. Gradually, my interests expanded beyond regular script. Today, I primarily study classical masterpieces, especially those by Wang Xizhi.
The legendary calligrapher Wang Xizhi, often revered as the sage of calligraphy, lived during the early 4th century and remains one of the most influential figures in Chinese art history. Pietro is one of many admirers tracing Wang's legacy across archives, artifacts, and ancient texts. That journey led him to the Beilin Museum, also known as the Stele Forest in Xi'an, Shanxi Province. Among the museum's collection of more than 3,000 steles is a remarkable piece from the Tang Dynasty, featuring 1,903 characters compiled from various works attributed to Wang. It's called Ji Wang Sheng Jiao Xu, translated as the preface to the Buddhist scriptures engraved on stone in Wang Xizhi's collated characters. The inscription is considered one of the closest glimpses we have into the authentic spirit of Wang's calligraphy. Language barriers have long prevented many foreigners from fully appreciating the beauty of Chinese calligraphy. To help bridge that gap, Pietro turned his research into a book, which was published in English in 2021. In Pietro's view, even the most extensive libraries cannot match the impact of standing before a monumental stele or ancient inscription. He still remembers the first time he encountered them in person. The experience was transformative.
第一次看碑的实物之后呢，我就发现我脑子理解的通过
After seeing actual stone inscriptions for the first time, I realized that there was a huge gap between what I had understood from calligraphy copybooks and the real thing. At the very least, I understood that I still had a lot to learn and a lot of work ahead of me. From that moment on, I became very clear about one thing. Beyond academic research in books, I needed to combine theoretical studies with hands-on experience.
因为书法是书写的艺术嘛。
Because calligraphy is the art of writing, we must observe actual written works. As I began visiting places rich in calligraphy culture, not just the museums in Beijing, but also provinces like Shandong, Henan, Shanxi, and even Hunan, I discovered many stone inscriptions and institutions that preserve calligraphic works. Through these travels, I gained insights not only into China's regional cultural characteristics, but also into many aspects of its ancient civilization.
了解很多中国古代文明的现象。
That's why, as a teacher, he brings this philosophy into the classroom, taking his students out of lecture halls and into the field, encouraging them to experience cultural heritage firsthand. As the Chinese saying goes, read 10,000 books and travel 10,000 miles. Pietro believes that walking the land, touching its history, and reading its relics is essential to truly approach the world of the ancients.
我们欣赏的书法作品呢是有意义的。
The calligraphy works we admire are composed of meaningful Chinese characters, often classical texts. Naturally, these texts reflect many aspects of the time in which they were written, including culture, history, society, and religion.
For Pietro, Chinese calligraphy is not just a study of beautiful writing. It is a gateway into the spirit of Chinese civilization. Through brushstrokes and stone engravings, classical texts, and daily meals, Pietro has forged a dialogue between East and West, past and present. That's it for today's episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you are interested in hearing more fascinating life stories, be sure to find us at radio.cgtn.com or on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Just key in footprints. You can find more stories anytime, anywhere. I'm Xingyu. Until next time, bye for now.